Hello, I'm Chris Plask. I'm Vice President of Strategy with Cybeats and constantly amazed that I get to do these sorts of things for a living and talk to people like Isaiah. How you doing, Isaiah?
What's up, Chris? Been a minute.
It's been a minute, yeah. So we were just talking about all this stuff,
I didn't
right?
get to go set up the S4 this year. We didn't have budget for that. So,
Oh, S4 was great this year. Dale
yeah.
Peterson, kudos to you. You put on a good show. And it was an awful lot of fun, right? So as you were one of the people, as I said, when I met you, was it last year at S4, I think? I've heard your name a number of times. People would say, you need to meet Isaiah Jones. Like, what? So I actually meet you in person. It's like, okay, who is this?
Yeah, I hear my name gets around for all sorts of reasons, good, bad, and indifferent, but it doesn't matter to me. It's not changing who I am.
as we were just talking about, right? We're technical folks. We're living in this influencer world, right? And we kind of are those folks. We're kind of doing it now, sharing our thoughts and trying to get our thoughts in other people's heads so things happen, right? Whatever those things are, right? Cybeats would like to make money. You and I are sort of long-term professionals and just want to move these things forward. And
yeah, I just want to get stuff done.
Right. Yeah. And sorry.
No, I was like, yeah, I was agreeing. I meet people like me. I just like to get the work done and go on to the next thing. As long as I'm getting paid and I get my PTO and I disappear. When I go on vacation, no one can find me. When I come back, I'm ready to go.
Well, we were talking about the boats. This. I've been for my entire career, trying to leverage this electronic communication thing we do to make my life a little better along the way. Working remotely the entire time, effectively, right?
Nice.
And now that we turn cameras on, because after 3 years ago, the pandemic happened, we're all zooming. And it's like, where are you? It's like, I've always been weird like this. I'm sorry, I'm a hacker. And to stay on topic, so you're a hacker, right? As we're just talking, right? When I was in my 30s, sort of early in the industry, I'm thinking I wasn't really a hacker as a kid. I mean, I had a computer or two and stuff, but I didn't, hack code and everything else. But with more thought, I have in fact been hacking everything forever, and everything you just told me about your childhood, that's hacking. When you're a smart little kid, you're looking around and saying, "All right, here are my options. There's this one little area right here. If I focus on that, I can break that apart. That leads to everything else." Right. So, Anthony, you can put the first question anyways. We'll start there, right? So as we're saying, in this series, we talk about transparency, past, present, future. You can start anywhere you like on this one, but I like your whole childhood story, right? I think you could, in your own space as a kid, see over the horizon. You're looking around and you're saying, all right, so from the beginning, looking forward, this transparency, ability to, let me seed that a little bit, right? So you got into Sea Cadets and various programs, early on as a kid, as a path to things.
Yeah, eighth grade.
Each of those led to other things that you couldn't have gotten to or forecast without them.
Yep.
Right. So how's that been?
It all happened by accident, right? Because I'm originally from Jersey. I didn't even want to move to Pennsylvania. My mom moved us to Harrisburg, and she was worried about me being like some cousins and my dad and others and joining gangs, or just going off and doing my own thing, because I always find my own trouble. Either to help other people or just because I was curious, or because as everybody in the industry sees, like when I go off and do something and I totally don't give a crap if everybody's with it, I've always been that way, like since I could walk. And that's a survival instinct, because when I grew up, we didn't always have things, and I was being moved between neighborhoods that were sometimes dangerous, and I had dangerous people that I associated with, right? Whether they were family members or just neighbors on the block. So I think that was just a natural curiosity, natural survival instinct. But by the time I got in 8th grade, I got introduced to Sea Cadets when I was 13, so I joined. I was already getting good grades in school. So that was kind of just normal. It was like my mom didn't give me a choice. If I got a bad grade, I got in trouble. If I got in a fight, I got in trouble. So by the time I got in 8th grade, I learned how to try not to fight as much as I did in elementary school. Because elementary school, I was a little kid, but I was, as you all see in the industry, I'm not afraid to go against the whole group. Like if it's me versus everybody, it's not gonna. If I'm gonna do something where I think it's the right thing to do, I'll die on that hill alone, and I won't care. And my family, everyone knows that's just who I am. But Sea Cadets kind of opened up technology, traveling the world, security. Thinking about something bigger than yourself and just your own family. So it went from just survival to, hey, this is a way out. This is a future. I want to travel the world. I want to go do other things. So from just getting into that and I wanted to be a fighter pilot, but then I had color vision problems, and then once I got into college, I had like flat feet and other medical problems. So I ended up just taking different jobs. I was doing warehousing, logistics, since high school, second and third shift. So back then I didn't even know what automation was, right? So it's kind of funny when you fast forward to today. Whenever I go into manufacturing or supply logistics or warehousing, it's like I used to be the human doing that job that the robot's doing. And then when I was working for the Navy, I worked on ERP and logistics IT, and then I got into information assurance. Then I resigned, became a contractor, started doing other stuff. Then later got into ICS, right? Then went back in the government again, at FERC on the national security side. And that's when I started getting on the TSSCI stuff of like, hey, these countries are messing with our stuff. And then, I resigned from that. So I was like, I don't want to be in government again. The interesting thing about that position is because of all the things I had done previously with mission assurance and critical infrastructure and systems integration, that job was too easy for me. And I was in my early 30s. And at the time, I think I was the only black GS-15 walking around FERC in his early 30s. I had some peers that were around my age, but like we were all in this organization called Young Government Leaders back when social media was still new, right? We were the original members of Facebook and LinkedIn back in 2005, 2007. And we had this little nonprofit group that some folks started. And we thought we were like the revolutionaries in government, right? Because we were all in our early 20s back then. And if you remember, before that, there was like a generation gap, a hiring freeze in government. So in the early 2000s, where all of us came in, it was like, who the hell are all these college kids? And we were in class and at work at the same time. There was no separation. This whole argument of get a job after school. Bro, we were working while we were in school, right? And we were government employees while we were taking classes. So they didn't give us scholarship money, which is a whole separate debate of like, hey, all the student loan stuff they're doing now doesn't apply to me because my time of service was way before the window. But it's like, I got exposed to all this stuff just by happenstance. And then once I saw something I wanted, like a new project, a new skill set, a new mission, or me being concerned about something, I just ran off and pushed my way in the door. It was very rarely that I got an invitation. Most of the time it was, hey, you said you need help. I volunteered, right? I was that guy. These days I try not to be, but that used to be me until I learned the lesson of never again volunteer yourself.
Yeah. I don't know. I kind of hate to learn those lessons, right? It's interesting. Just, I'm starting to see why people thought we should talk, right? So Anthony, you throw up the second question while I'm ranting on about this part, right? Because I've thought a lot about what it means to be a hacker, right? And people I'm 15 years older than you, or 20, anyways, whatever it is, and it's, but there's hard to have gotten here by a linear path. Now you can go out there right now and go to school, take cybersecurity classes, get a master's and a PhD, but there wasn't that. And for most of us,
didn't have that. Yeah,
right. It's this odd path, and what I think makes a hacker, is this sort of thing. You get a bright kid in some weird circumstances that makes them make choices ahead of their peers at a time, right? I grew up, in what I thought was, a incredibly boring, middle class sort of thing. But then the divorce, and then, when as a teen, the family breaks up, I don't finish high school, and I work in a plant for 6 years, right? As you put these smart kids in these tough little spots where you can look around and make choices. And I hear in a lot of things you're saying what I call inevitability curves, right? All my career, right? With the firewalls and the internet, I'm like, everybody's doing this. We're here. That time is there, and there's a line that joins us. We're going to need to figure out that line, right? And it sounds like you do the same sort of thing. You see, look, I don't, this is the way it's going, and it is. And everybody else can be like, no, this is the way it's done. But you're that charge off here, establish a beachhead, own the area, create the whole avenue there, which takes us a lot to that sort of question, right? Where there's a lot of fear and angst and storm and drang and ennui these days. It's hopeless and the world's terrible and blah blah blah. Particularly with old folks, people my age and up are like, oh, my kids these days, right? The me generation, the boomers, right? But it's not that bad. I think we're getting a handle on things, and we're able to to see more of what's going on, and I think the future is really bright. I think we have to put in visibility for supply chain software, software supply chain security, so we can talk to each other really, really clearly, enunciate things, and it feeds back into our ability to speak to each other and have more transparency at all sorts of levels, right? And that 20 years and 30 and 40 years younger than me now, generations coming up, I think anyways, let me stop on that rant. Do we know what's going on? Is it better now? Are we headed in the right direction? Is it?
I mean, some of this stuff is like Back to the Future for me. It's like, I think because of the work that I did when I was younger, when I see everyone arguing over remote work or supply chain transparency, and it's like, dude, we learned this stuff back in like warehousing, logistics, and manufacturing, and Navy Civil Service, because I worked for NAVSUP. Like we were the ones designing all the systems for the sailors, and like, the ammo systems, the food systems, the parts refurbishment. I saw that when I was in my early 20s and my teens, watching those old people. Some of them passed away already, right? Because that generation, the punch card generation, is practically gone at this point. I mean, some of them are still around, but there's people that I knew back then that threw a COBOL book at me because I was bored one day. And they're like, hey, read this. They're not going to teach you that in school. And they're right. They didn't teach it to me in school. So it's like being in school and at work at the same time, I think benefited for me because I'm a 80s baby. So I'm kind of like Generation X meets Millennial. I'm like in the middle because I think they call us mid 80s babies. Like we don't have a generation because we grew up like Generation X, but we technically were the first millennials, but we don't see ourselves as millennials because we saw technology, but we didn't always have access to it until we got.
Let me ask: were you the youngest among your peers? Because I was as well. I'm technically a Gen X, but everybody, all the family and friends, and skipping years of school, they're all boomers. I'm the Gen X are raised by boomers. That same sort of transitional weirdness.
Yeah, I mean, everything that I did, like even when I was a Sea Cadets, it took like that first couple of years I was a younger, but then as I became the lead petty officer and the first cadet, the black cadet to make chief, then I was older than the other guys, and I built like a team around me. And then after I left, I mean, those cadets, they all went on to do great things. There was like, I think 5 or 6 cadet chiefs after me and my commanders. Like we took something that was really small and then it turned into like these younger ones going off and doing. I mean, some of them became Navy SEALs and other things. I mean, and that was the other thing, being around that environment as a teenager, you're in the ghetto, inner city, high school during the day, and then you're hanging out with firefighters and, recon Marines, MARSOC guys, submarine guys, aviation guys. I mean, like just having those programs when they talk about how do we find unicorns, you create them. You expose kids to things that they don't normally get to see, especially inner city kids or rural kids. You got Sea Cadets, you got, Young Marines, Civil Air Patrol. You bring these programs and this education and STEM stuff down to those programs where they're already working with kids, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Boys and Girls Clubs. It's not rocket science. We just need to get back to basic American stuff that we used to do in the 80s and the 90s. Like we used to be free range kids. I was a latchkey kid. Like,
right.
I know today that's like sacrilege, but it's like, bro, how do you think we all became the way we are? We had to learn, everything's not all roses. We learned from our suffering. And I know that sucks because today it sucks to suffer, but that made us strong. It gave us grit. It taught us how to go figure stuff out. Troubleshooting is a skill that you can't teach in school. like it's life experience. Like you got to have both. You can't have one or the other. I don't get this whole argument of certs, degrees, or experience. I got all 3.
Yeah.
Why are you choosing? What do you need to survive? What do you need to build that next thing? Right. And as far as the word hacker, I remember the time hanging around hackers where I never considered myself part of the group because it was always about coding and exploits. And I'm like, that's not how it originally started. Right? It's like understanding how things work. I don't have to code something, especially if you put it on GitHub. Why the hell would I try to code it? I'm just going to take the thing off GitHub. And if it needs to be modified for what I'm using it for, then I'll do it. Outside of that, if I don't need to do it, I'm going to take the pieces and use them the way I want to use them for whatever purpose, right? To me, that was hacking, but some people would say, no, you got to write exploits to be a hacker. And I'm like, no, you don't. I could talk my way into your facility right now, and I don't even need to clone the badge.
This is being recorded for broadcast. I'm here to officially state I'm on your side. Yeah, hacking is about knowing watching systems and knowing that if you stand right there on that board at 3 o'clock on a Tuesday and just bounce it, the door will pop open. It's not about opening the door, it's about understanding the system and seeing where the next steps are in it. And with that, Anthony, I'm looking at this question we wrote, so that next question, if you want to put that up there, again, this, I think it is a generational thing. I think, my generation, is spreading too much, doom and gloom about the future. But then again, I grew up with it as well. Like, we're going to run out of food with 3.5 billion people, and we're all going to be nuked to death, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But I see a great, is the future rational? That's not the question I see in the notes. Okay. But we'll run with that one. Yeah, see, that was from the last.
That's a good question,
episode. Is the future rational? That was a. I think of the guest. I'm
a Gemini. Some days I'm realistic and pessimistic, and some days I'm optimistic. It just depends. It's like I have the inverse reaction to stuff. It's like the stuff that scares everyone else. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go fight that thing, right?
Right, it's fun. It's like, where all the opportunity is, right?
Well, it's like I'm not gonna let that thing dictate to me how I'm gonna live the future. But at the same time, my pessimistic side is concerned. Is like, hey, we shouldn't be using it that way. That's stupid. We're gonna drive ourselves to extinction. So I'm like somewhere in the middle of. I'm not necessarily scared of the thing I'm scared of how dumb humans are using the thing, not the thing itself, if that makes sense. Like, AI doesn't scare me. It's the people that are going to use it for stupid ideas that are like, okay, now I'm going to have to learn how to sabotage that thing because this dumb human over here, the AI by itself doesn't scare me. I know it scares some people, but I think it can be useful. It's just a tool. I see all these things as hammers and nails and screwdrivers and knowing like when to use which one. I mean, that's how I see all technology. That's how I've always seen technology is like it's a means to an end, right? Humans are the problem, in my opinion, or the solution, because the technology is just a hammer and a nail.
Well, and to take 2 points in my own life and map my opinion of that. So, in 1969, I'm 4 years old. I'm watching this little black and white TV. I think it was the Dick Cavett show, and there's very authoritative figures in there saying, the Earth can only ever feed 3.54 billion people. It's currently 3.52 billion people. That's why 100 million Americans will starve to death in the 70s. And I'm for, right? I'm just working on what numbers are and how this all works, but it just sounds bad, right?
Yeah.
And for the record, we make 30% more food per person with 8 billion people than we did with 3.5, right? And there's, as both holistically as a number and as a part of population, severe hunger and starvation is down. And in the for me, the early internet days in 91, 92, right? I had this crazy idea for a firewall. We started doing it, and I found out there weren't enough IP addresses, and went to my boss and said, "Oh my God, we're gonna die. The company's gonna." He didn't blink bat an eye. And he said, "Whenever there's enough need, a technical solution is found." Right, and me and Andrew Flint and Amayel Gundy, along with 2 other teams, we didn't know we're doing the same thing, all came up with network address translation because it wasn't hard; it was laying there to be done. And I think all of these things from climate to the supply chain security, right? How can we actually get this fast enough and clear enough and automated enough so that AI can manage a lot of these things and take us to a whole new level, not just security, but efficiency, right? Logistics, in your military background, my manufacturing background, right? Just if you could take a lot of these steps out that take hours and days and so forth and automate them so they happen in seconds, it means we have perhaps more resources to save the whales and save the manatees and the dolphins, right? And so you're right. We're in
isn't that what Lean Six
Star Wars future, but
isn't that what Lean Six Sigma taught us? I mean, I remember learning Lean Six Sigma, green belt, and black belt stuff in my early 20s. Like, isn't that what it was supposed to teach us? Continuous improvement, efficiencies, right? I mean, a lot of these things to me are just like, why are everybody? It's not new. It's not new, right? I mean, even when I was on the commercial side, going into some of those like manufacturing plants and oil and gas, it's not like, I don't want to say groupthink, but it's almost like people are walking around in blinders with what they know, and until they meet someone who's been in all the different buckets, who's learned to open their eyes. I mean, I think it's human nature. We all get like that, right? And even I was like that until I was an asset owner. I would say, "Hey, asset owners need to do this." Then when I became an astronaut, I was like, what the F, right? So, right. And now post that experience, I'm like, oh, asset owners actually need this. And this is the problem that I had every day. So it's like, I think when you change your environment and you get new experiences and you wear the other hats, and then you look back on that, you start saying, okay, all of you are going like this, like that Spider-Man cartoon with everybody pointing at who's Spider-Man. That's what's actually happening. And folks like me that have finally rotated through those different roles and different types of orgs, small, large, government, contractor, asset owner, integrator, startups. I mean, I've checked all those stupid boxes. You look back on that and you're like, well, when we were here, we thought this, but we were wrong because over here we experienced this, right? You start seeing things more holistically, at least for me personally.
Well, and you know, I think you see the opportunities for efficiency. I see the opportunities for efficiency everywhere, right? You know, from, you know, this question may have come along because I was, you know, we're working on building these boats, and one of the things you have to deal with automated eco tour boats is, you know, human systems, and incinerators will actually do that, you know, so you can end up with no ash and no toxic anything. So we can just engineer our way out of, you know, sort of all of this. But I think we need to believe that we can, right? And
I agree.
Story of your life, and you know, kind of stands up to that. You believe you can find your way out of it. And if you can't, oh well, at least it was fun to try.
I know, right? You'll figure out what you can't do. But the funny thing is, people keep forgetting we got ourselves into all these problems. like every single freaking problem that we have, the only people who should be complaining should be all of nature, because they didn't vote on none of this stuff. And it's like, who put humans in charge? And that's the cool thing about traveling, especially in like places like Africa, South America, and Australia. Like all the places I've been, is like when you're out in nature and it's just you and them, you start wondering how the hell did our species become in charge? Because we go against common sense in nature. It's like we created all the problems that we have, and we're acting like we can't get ourselves out of them. It's like, yes, it's hard, but hello, we're like, all this stuff was engineered by us. We thought of this crap, so we can think our way out of it, or we can learn what doesn't work. I mean, that's how we evolved for hundreds of thousands of years. I mean, that's how we got here.
Right.
So for me, it's like when you step out of the day-to-day nonsense and you reflect for a little bit, you're like, that's when the random ideas come. The PLC coding practices, I forgot. I think one day I was frustrated about something. Nobody cared about it. And I just went and did some PLC programming classes. And I was like, hey, we should do security for function blocks and this and that, right? That's how I came up with that. And the first reaction was nobody cared. It's like, hey, I can do exploits on this thing. And I'm like, yeah, but the programmers should still learn how to program ladder logic from a safety and security perspective. Like they can validate timers and counters and all this other stuff. Right? No one cared until I took that to Jake, and then Jake was like, hey, we should talk about this. And I'm like, yeah, Jake, you should talk about this, right? Like, if you read that article I wrote, it's like, I knew Jake as an old engineer. They would listen to him, old white dude, been around 30, 40 years, program. So I was like, yeah, Jake, you do the talk. I'll just raise money and get challenge coins and everything else. But, we didn't know it was going to go viral. It was just the two of us sitting around like, bantering about, hey, this sucks. We should make our integrators not do it. Like, we were working for a big EPC integrator. So it was like you said, I was just trying to do the right thing and do the things that I had an itch. It's like, why can't we do this? The stuff's already there, right? But it was like that with everything I've done. I mean, even the stuff I do now just because if I don't see everyone working on it, I'll go figure it out myself.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, with that, this has been a great conversation. We should probably wrap it, but there's so much hope in this, and young folks out there, I want to make this point. This field, cybersecurity, is wide open. I think it's just getting to a decent maturity level. It's a lot of fun. If you put your head in this, in this space where you're just, as you're saying, Isaiah, you just think about the problem. And I love the way you said that too, because literally we built it. It didn't exist in the universe. You couldn't have this problem without people. So I'm pretty sure we could just walk back to the part where we built it and engineer it again. Yeah. So thanks, man. You're the greatest. Thanks for all you've done. Thanks for spending the time today, and let's do more of it.
Yeah, likewise, brother. Good to see you again. Enjoy your boat, man. I mean, you and Bob Sadler, I'm like, yo, you guys, that's how I'm gonna spend when I get retired. That's how I'm gonna spend my retirement.
You got a standing invitation. Come down and sail with me.
I'm gonna go sit in the Maldives and a few other places and just hop from country to country, which I already do that now at least once a year. So I go to some random place on my bucket list. But when I retire, I'm like, I'm just gonna not do nothing.
I don't think you're capable of it. I know I'm not.
I was gonna say, I was about to say I'm
that's
lying
not gonna
because
happen,
I'll get bored within 2 weeks and I'm like,
oh yeah,
I'll start messing with. I'm like, yo, I need to go do X, Y, Z, or I'll hear about something and I'll get pissed off if I don't see anyone doing it what I think we should be doing, and then my curious ass will go learn how to do it or go find someone that knows it, and then I'll start asking questions, and then if they don't give me the answers I want, then like with PLC program and everything else, I'll go learn it myself, and then I'll tell everyone, hey, did you know that we're doing this? Why are we doing it? Hey, why aren't we doing this? Right? Like that's, I mean, you've all seen me do that repeatedly with every random topic I've come up with over the years. You know, I went from not talking at all to like, whenever I feel like something's on my mind, I just say what I need to say. I don't give a crap if it sticks on the wall or not. It needed to be said because nobody else was saying it, right?
Awesome. Thanks, Isaiah. Thanks, folks.
Hey, no worries, brother. Take it easy.